Pat it down, down, down. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night. It's Friday of the Thanksgiving long weekend. I hope you have some great plans to spend with friends and family or anybody of like mind. I hope. And you know what? There's a lot of people who may be spending this long weekend by themselves, by choice, because they don't want to be involved in the family drama. I don't blame them one bit. There are some who may be spending this long weekend alone, not by choice. And if you are one of those people, it's okay to reach out in the comments of this show. We have an absolutely fantastic community of people here. And any number of them would be willing to talk with you, just to talk. Because I know that this half decade has been very difficult for a lot of people. Coming up on the show tonight, Lunacy from all across the country. We're going to cover it. Antifa, is it a real thing? Well, of course, we know it is. But the left, believe it or not, and I guess, I'm going to have to find a better way to describe the left because I don't want to go left, right anymore. I'd rather go a certain segment of the population. The Marxists, the neo-Marxists, let's call them, are denying that this organization or this ideology even exists. Jimmy Kimmel is one of those people. He was let back on the air by ABC a couple of weeks ago after the horrendous remarks after Charlie Kirk's assassination. And he went on last night and said, there's no such thing as Antifa, if you can believe it. In the meantime, there is mountains of video that prove him wrong. I don't know how they square that circle. I don't. So we're going to investigate that. Also, what's called the Indian industry or the reconciliation industry all across Canada's big business, billions and billions of dollars, especially in British Columbia, though. Andrea Humphrey of Rebel News did a deep dive into that with Dallas Brody of the BC One Party. We've got an excerpt of that coming up in the show. As well, Universal Ostrich Farm. We're going to cover a couple of things from there in just a couple of minutes. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, you guys, is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, CanadaNanoSilver.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Today we're comparing Crest toothpaste to SilverSeuticals toothpaste. First, we're starting out with Crest. It's a classic, it's an original. It's what I've used most of my life. But that being said, it does have its problems. First off, the consistency is so weird and thick, and I get it's a paste, but it really doesn't spread that well. And I must also say that I'm not in love with the taste. I get toothpaste isn't supposed to taste good, but why shouldn't it? But that being said, it does get the job done. Next, we have SilverSeuticals. They have 3 flavors, but today we're going with Bubbleberry. And already it smells so good. So I'm excited to see what this tastes like. The consistency is also a lot smoother, and I must say it spreads way nicer in your mouth.
This literally tastes like fruit bubble gum.
Yeah, this toothpaste was pretty good. I actually went in for seconds, and it's infused with nano silver, so it helps remineralize your teeth and keep them fresh throughout the day.
100% go with SilverSeuticals.
And here's the results. What's your favorite toothpaste?
Canada Nano Silver, 204-808-9292. Info at CanadaNanoSilver.com if you want to get tickets for the big Regina Health and Wellness Expo. Not this weekend, obviously. Next weekend in that building right by the football field out there. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but Kevin and Anna from Canada Nano Silver will be there with all of their fantastic products, and hopefully you will be too. Hello. Who's watching tonight? This is Friday, long weekend. Viewership is going to be a little bit down live tonight. Everybody's probably going to catch up at some point this weekend, but let's see who's out there anyway. Tony is watching on X from Calgary. Hello, Tony. Michael in Brampton. Hello, Derek watching in Kamloops. Wayne is watching on X. Wayne and Patty from Norwich, Ontario. Hello, Larry in Windsor. Cheryl is watching tonight. Save the ostriches. Yeah. Barb, hello in southern Manitoba. Wayne, Carol, Lucettes watching. Johnny in Cambridge. Hello, Susan in Leamington. Jonathan's watching in Ohio tonight. Hello, Leanne and Donatella and Laura, Shelley, Dodie Ann, Paul, Sharon, Lulu. The gang's all here on Facebook, X, YouTube, and on Rumble. Esky Dogs Notable, Patricia0711, Nutsy, Crivier, Starliner 1961, Jane Eliz. The world is watching. Absolutely, man. Whatever platform you're watching on, wherever you happen to be watching from tonight, don't forget to like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. All right, Universal Ostrich Farm. We understand there was some sort of a deadline that was happening out there at 2 o'clock Pacific time this afternoon. They were supposed to be hearing from the Supreme Court whether or not the court would be hearing this case. And that deadline, if it was a deadline, came and went. We haven't heard yet. I mean, experts are suggesting, and I even said this, because you know how the courts work in this country. Especially, we're talking about the Supreme Court here. It could be anywhere between 1 and 3 months before we find out if the court will even hear this case. It's been, what, 2 weeks? So it could be CFIA and RCMP will be on site there at Universal Ostrich Farm for a while. I mean, this could go until Christmas, maybe more. We don't know. In the meantime, there seems to be, I want to put this delicately, there's a lot of bad reporting coming out of Universal Ostrich Farm. I'm not going to name names here, but people are reporting emotionally and not factually in many cases. I can't say in all cases, but in many cases. And they have to watch out for that, because what they're doing is making themselves targets for CFIA lawsuits, libel, slander. That could come at some point, because some of the stuff that some of the people at Universal Ostrich Farm are saying is not factually correct. It's based upon emotion. And that's going to get, or could get, them into trouble. And I'm not giving CFIA any ideas here, you guys. I mean, they've thought of this long before I'm saying it now. And I'm telling you this as a 40-year veteran of media, journalism, and commenting. You've really got to watch the stuff that comes out of your mouth, especially when you've got a vindictive federal agency with zero oversight as your opponent. You really, really need to watch your P's and Q's. Seriously. And again, the old saying is you're going to catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And as for anybody who is following the reporting out of Universal Ostrich Farm, take some of it with a grain of salt. All right? You're getting live video from there. I understand that. But some of the commentary is skewed. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, we've got a law professor, according to Toronto Today, who says he would be surprised if the Supreme Court, if the High Court takes the case of Universal Ostrich Farms. Law professor at the University of Ottawa says, well, I'd be shocked if the Supreme Court of Canada decides to hear this case. So here's the story. Paul Daly, the university's research chair in administrative law and governance, said it's been misreported that the High Court granted a stay on the cull. Daly said only one of the court's judges granted this interim stay of the cull order for the flock at Universal Ostrich Farms in order to give all 9 members a chance to consider the farm's bid to have the cull stayed and the case heard. If the High Court declines to grant the farm's application for leave to appeal, Daly said the bid to stay the cull would be rendered moot, and it would be the end of the line legally for the ostriches. I also understand there are options after this, but I can't say any more about it at this stage of the game. The CFIA said in a statement last week the flock numbered between 3 and 330 ostriches, while the farm has said the number is closer to 400. Both the farm and the CFIA have filed documents with the Supreme Court, which ordered last week that the birds stay in the custody of the agency pending the court's decisions. The latest statement from CFIA issued Wednesday said its inspectors were feeding and watering the animals, which were showing no signs of agitation or stress related to their presence. Now, this has been disputed by the family at Universal Ostrich Farm. What we've got here, that I want to be absolutely factual about this, and yes, there are obstructions by CFIA in terms of sight lines, blocked cameras and whatnot. Transparency is a problem for them. But what we've got here is a he said, she said situation, and that's all we can say about it, factually and legally. I'm sorry to tell you guys that, but that's just the fact of the matter. The agency said it was aware of what it described as online campaigns encouraging supporters of the ostrich farm to deliberately tie up the agency's phone lines and resources by falsely requesting inspection services. Well, that's not true. That's not true at all. They said the disruptions risked interfering with its ability to respond to legitimate calls and could delay critical services that protect Canadians' food safety, plant health, and animal health. The latest CFIA statement and legal filings come after police escorted agency staff onto the farm near Edgewood in order to serve a warrant and take control of the ostriches' enclosure on September 22nd. So look, video came out the other day that the family had asked the RCMP to do a count of the herd or the flock at Universal Ostrich Farm. Now, seeing as how they have no direct line of contact with CFIA except for that email portal, they went to the RCMP. The RCMP said, yeah, sure, we can try that. They said they could fly a drone over, or they said they would ask CFIA, you see, this is the murky part of it, if they could fly a drone over to get a count. And they were turned down by the CFIA and apparently admonished for that request as well. The way it was painted by some independent sources out of the farm was that the RCMP said, yes, absolutely, we'll do that. And then they were turned away by the CFIA. And that's just not the way it operates. Even though the RCMP is there to act as mediators between the supporters, the family, and CFIA, that's not their primary objective. Their primary duty, and again, guys, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with any of this, but I'm just giving you facts here. The primary duty of the RCMP in this situation is to support CFIA and their agents. That's what they're there to do. Number one job of the RCMP on site. Yes, of course, secondary objectives will include trying to keep the peace, trying to maybe be a communications conduit between supporters and CFIA. But number one, their job is to support and protect CFIA agents. Again, I don't agree with this, but that's what their job is. And so if an RCMP officer said, yes, we'll absolutely fly a drone and get a head count for you, he or she was wrong to do that. They would have to go to CFIA for permission to do that first. And I don't know exactly how that shook out. So when people report emotionally, what you're getting is a very skewed, one-sided story. And I totally understand that people are upset all across the country that this is happening. I am too. I think it's ridiculous. But factual reporting is better. Calm heads are better in a situation like this. That is my opinion. A lot of people have been asking, well, where's the SPCA in this anyway? Where do they stand? What the hell is going on? We haven't heard one peep from them. Well, they did release a statement a few days ago. I'm not sure if you heard about this. It's on their website, spca.bc.ca. The BC SPCA's vision is to see all animals and people thriving together. This includes, now in my opinion, this is a cop-out by them. This includes companion, farmed, and wild animals in British Columbia. The death of any animal always weighs heavy on the hearts of BC SPCA staff. We know how hard a situation like this can be on the animals and the community who's cared for them, and wish to extend our sympathies to all involved. Recently, a statement from the Coexisting with Wild Animals section of the BC SPCA's website has been circulating on social media. This statement speaks to the organization's authority to intervene in situations involving a legally permitted cull of free living wildlife. However, that same authority does not apply to disease management situations in a farm environment, as this falls under federal jurisdiction and is overseen by the CFIA. The BC SPCA is not a government agency, nor is it funded by any level of government for animal protection services. BC SPCA animal protection officers are granted authority under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act to investigate and take action against concerns related to animal cruelty. However, authority granted under the PCA Act does not allow the BC SPCA to intervene or influence decisions in disease management situations or to stop a legally permitted cull. I don't know how they know that unless they've consulted lawyers. Because there's a lot of conflicting laws and mandates in this country. Provincial versus federal, federal versus federal in some cases. There's no evidence currently before the BC SPCA that would justify an investigation of distress pursuant to the PCA Act related to ongoing activities or planned cull at the Universal Ostrich Farm. I would take issue with that as well. One ostrich has died from injuries because of, I guess we could call it a stampede caused by drones flying overhead. Does that constitute animal cruelty? What about not feeding them for well over a day? Because that we know that has happened. I would suggest the BC SPCA in this case is copping out. They're backing down. A key part of the BC SPCA's work in support of vulnerable animals across the province is to identify opportunities where the organizations can influence systems change and address the root causes of animal suffering in our society. Blah-dity, blah-dity, blah. The BC SPCA continues to field a significant volume of inquiries related to Universal Ostrich Farm from concerned animal lovers across North America. Please note that BC SPCA staff, including animal helpline operators and animal center teams, cannot provide more information about the situation at Universal Ostrich Farm. I think that's a big cop-out. They make it seem as though they have already backed down before they've even made an inquiry about it. Oh, no, that's CFIA. All right, it's out of our jurisdiction. We can't do anything about it. Well, you know what? You're the SPCA. You can at least make a call, right? Seems a little bogus to me. All right, so there's a lot of craziness happening across the country. We're going to go from BC to Alberta to Manitoba and then finally out to Nova Scotia in just a second. And then we're going to talk about Antifa towards the end of the show tonight. And for you Nighthawks, for you All Access Nighthawks, there's a viewer's choice coming up on the extension tonight at shadowdavids.com. By the way, if you're curious, the subscription count is at 94 right now. 94. We need 200 to keep the show going on social media. I'll make the announcement next Wednesday. We need to see if this is going to be a sustainable project going forward. And if not, we'll just do the show on the website and give you guys on social media clips here and there every now and again. Okay, so Mark Carney. It's a slow day in politics. It's a Friday, the Friday before a long weekend, Thanksgiving long weekend. So there's a lot of sleepy media out there today and politicians as well. Mark Carney is defended paying more than $500,000 a year to CEO appointees. $500,000. The Prime Minister defending his decision to pay the CEOs of 2 new government offices. These are newly created by Carney himself. Annual salaries that are higher than those of his own cabinet ministers. Douglas Guzman, the head of a new defense procurement office, and Don Farrell, the head of the new major projects office, will each make more than $577,000 a year, not counting bonuses. I don't know what their bonuses could be based on. Carney said their responsibilities are enormous and include things like making major military procurement decisions and reviewing industrial development projects worth tens and tens of billions of dollars of economic activity. In a recent social media post, conservative leader Pierre Poilievre criticized Carney's appointment of Guzman, who formerly worked in senior positions at the Royal Bank of Canada and Goldman Sachs. Poilievre said Carney is expanding the bureaucracy and giving new appointees massive taxpayer-funded paychecks. He's right. But Carney said he needs the best people to deliver on important mandates, adding he believes their pay in the private sector was substantially higher. So they're taking a pay cut to come and work for the federal government out of patriotism. You gotta love it. Okay, Lindsay Shepherd. She was a political staffer working for the BC Conservative Party. Last week, she made a post on X. The post was all about Truth and Reconciliation Day and how it's based upon lies and lies and lies. And then she got fired. She got fired by the BC Conservatives for making that post, and here she is explaining it.
Last week, I posted this on X. It was a critique of Orange Shirt Day and this orange flag that is flying outside of the British Columbia legislature. I can give more context later, but I want to start off right away with the audio recording of me getting fired by the Conservative Party of BC.
Okay. Lindsay, this is not an easy call for us to make. Your tweet has caused significant issues across the province. Whether done intentionally or not, this is not the behavior that is expected from staff. And John Rustad has made the decision that we have to let you go effective immediately. And I wanted to say thank you for your service.
Okay.
Lindsay, I'll be sending you a letter to your personal email, which outlines your termination without cause.
You gotta love human resources, right? So anyway, we know she got fired. John Rustad is the guy that fired her. He's the one that made the call. So she posted an op-ed on Juno News today. The real story behind why I was fired from the BC Conservatives. And here it is. Last week, I was fired from my communications job with the Conservative Party of British Columbia caucus by its current leader, John Rustad. This was because of a single post on the social media platform X. Just before National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I took to my personal X account to critique the fact the BC legislature building was flying an orange flag and displaying an orange shirt. And there it is there. There's the post. These symbols exploded in prevalence in 2021 after Kamloops Nation in Kamloops claimed they found the remains of 215 children in unmarked graves on the grounds of the former Kamloops residential school, even though to this day they have found only soil anomalies via radar technology. Later that year, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau dubbed National Day for Truth and Reconciliation a federal holiday and then famously took off to vacation in the surf town of Tofino on the inaugural official day, which is supposedly a solemn and reflective occasion. The point of my post was that the orange shirt and the orange flag perpetuate a narrative about Canada's history. The 215 bodies of children were found at the Kamloops residential school. That hasn't been proven true in the years since it's been claimed. Orange Shirt Day itself has an origin story that dates back to the 2010s. A woman named Phyllis Webstad claims the staff at the St. Joseph Mission student residence in Williams Lake, where she went for 1 year, took her orange shirt away when she was 6 years old and made her wear a school uniform. But the point remains that you didn't see a massive nationwide spike of orange Indigenous-themed shirts until 2021. And Orange Shirt Day overlaps with the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. I don't post on social media often, Lindsay says. And I didn't represent myself as a political party member or staffer on X, but my post resonated with a lot of people and was making the rounds. You'd think that a Conservative Party would value having staff that take Canadian history seriously and want to take a critical look at an issue before accepting claims without sufficient evidence. But I was ordered by the party at the direction of leader John Rustad to remove the post. I complied. However, the pressure from two BC NDP MLAs, Rohini Arora and Spencer Chandra Herbert, was just too much for Rustad to bear. Arora and Herbert were publicly calling for my denouncement and firing, as was the head of the Union for BC Indian Chiefs, who is the spouse of BC NDP MLA Joan Phillip. Wow. It ultimately didn't matter that I complied with the request to delete the post because Rustad capitulated to the demands of the leftist BC NDP and fired me. In a 2-minute phone call, I was told that due to my post, I was being immediately terminated without cause. My post and firing had been public all along. A CBC radio host asked Rustad if questioning the narrative of residential schools in Canada is hateful. I think that spreading or making comments that could be viewed as inciting hate and racism is not welcome. It's not welcome by me, and as long as I'm leader of this party, it will not be welcome as part of the Conservative Party of British Columbia. That was Rustad's answer, believe it or not. To the Globe and Mail, he said, when I talk about free speech, I talk about what I consider to be free speech that's reasonable about topics. I don't mean free speech that promotes hate or racism. This is the leader of the BC Conservative Party. Rustad foolishly is playing into the hands of the left. He is uncritically adopting their position that critiquing politicized symbols and asking for more information about the claim of 215 unmarked graves is hate and racism. He's chilling speech, buttressing a culture of ideological conformity and censorship, and promoting political correctness over truth-seeking. Rustad so desperately wants to attract NDP voters that he chooses to alienate the Conservative base that propped him up in the 2024 election. Unfortunately for Rustad, the base doesn't want to prop him up anymore, because for some of us, the truth part of National Day for Truth and Reconciliation matters, and we don't like it when pandering politicians think they can dictate the terms of open inquiry. Rustad doesn't defend conservatives, and he doesn't defend Canadian history against leftist attacks. And in return, there are very few remaining that defend Rustad. Wow. This young lady is going places, but only if this country turns itself around. And I'm hoping it will. Now, speaking of Truth and Reconciliation Day, what about the Indian industry? That's what Leighton Gray calls it. Leighton Gray is a Native or Aboriginal First Nations attorney in Alberta. Dallas Brody is the leader of the BC One Party. It's a new party, or One BC. It's a new party in British Columbia. And hopefully they get some traction out there. And she sat down with Drea Humphrey of Rebel News to talk about what could be a $1 billion industry when it comes to truth and reconciliation.
In British Columbia, one thing is increasingly becoming common. That is what I call reconciliation overreach, where if you're a non-Indigenous Canadian, you can be kicked out of public spaces by Indigenous people. Or we've recently seen the court recognize Aboriginal land title over private land of non-Aboriginals. A new documentary coming out that is brought forth by the One BC Party in British Columbia, and this is the leader beside me, Dallas Brody, is going to be shedding light on the reconciliation industry in a big way. That documentary is called Making a Killing: Reconciliation, Genocide, and Plunder in Canada. All right, Dallas Brody, good to see you here on Rebel News again.
Good to see you, Drea. Thanks for having me.
Now, we've interviewed you before about what you call the reconciliation industry. Yes. But boy, are you about to tackle it in a very big way. Your party has brought forth a documentary. Why?
We realized that there was a lack of awareness in British Columbia about what is actually going on in the reconciliation industry in British Columbia. People aren't aware of the magnitude of what's going on, and this has been brought on by what's called UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which is the act that brought UNDRIP directly into British Columbia and changed things completely in our province.
That's true. We have a website called stopundrip.com if you're unfamiliar with it. But basically, it's an aspirational framework that British Columbia was the first jurisdiction to adopt and incorporate as law, looking at what is sort of this utopian way for Indigenous rights and excluding elsewhere. But something I noticed from some of the trailers, we've played one trailer already, is that it seems like you even got voice from an Indigenous person, which I know is hard to do. I've had a couple anonymous ones come forward, but tell us a little bit about what you found while you were going and getting information from this documentary from Indigenous Canadians.
Well, we have two Indigenous men in the documentary who speak to us. One is a member of the Lower Kootenay Band, one is a member of the Musqueam Band. And these are both individuals who contacted me when they heard me speaking out on the topic of reconciliation in British Columbia and problems that are afflicting Indigenous people in our province. They reached out to me and wanted to talk to me. So that's how I found them. They're brave men because it's not easy to do what they're doing.
I've seen it before. I've seen it with you. I've heard it myself. This accusation that any exposure on the misuse of tax dollars for the reconciliation industry, or talking about, like you've done before, saying, hey, there's been no bodies found, with over 100 bands that have come forth with sort of nefarious claims of unmarked graves of Indigenous children. But you get labeled a residential school denier or a racist, or your events are being, targeted when you're just trying to have a political event. So what do you say to that narrative to maybe even some people watching now who think that's who you are when you make a documentary like this?
Actually, I'm against all of the race-based laws that are being implemented in British Columbia. We cannot have a society that is divided on racial lines, and that's precisely what we have and what we're amplifying now. We are putting these race-based laws on steroids with DRIPA. In fact, we've done it, and it's happening, and it's extremely dangerous to the province's well-being, and it's hurting the 96% of people who aren't Indigenous, and a lot of the people who are Indigenous who aren't able to participate in the bounty of all of this. These names, you get called these names because I really feel the powers that be do not want this topic discussed. This is literally a money train. We have seen a transfer of money, wealth, and money, land, and power to a degree that we've never seen since the announcement of the Kamloops gravesite, that to this date no bodies have been found. So this has delivered a huge uptick in transfer of money, wealth, and power, and we're currently working on getting the exact numbers of how much it's ballooned in the last few years.
Now, there's so much happening. I have seen, from covering this issue for a handful of years now, I have seen that the public seems to be ready to talk about this. They're starting to notice, if I can't read a street name in my own country because it's not in the English language or the French language, we've got a little bit of a problem here. But for people who are maybe just starting to go, okay, maybe there is something to this, what is one sort of core issue that you think they need to be aware of that you touch on in the documentary?
One of the main things that I want people to understand is that the money that's going across is not benefiting the average Indigenous people who are living on reserves and off reserve. This money is going into an industry now that is big, and the money is sitting at this top level. So it goes to chiefs and council, developers, big law firms and small law firms, accounting firms, and consultants, and it's a lot of money. When I was a young lawyer, practicing in a big law firm, the big firms have, big offices and so on. And I was at one of a couple of these in my early days. There were no full departments for Aboriginal law. There might be one person practicing this. Apparently now, a lot of the big law firms have 10 or 12 people in the Aboriginal law department. Well, that's a lot of money going to these lawyers. And these lawyers aren't Indigenous. They're just business people making money. And what we've learned from the people we've spoken to in our documentary is that the money is not getting down. People on the reserves are getting frustrated, and I will say that we are noticing that more people are willing to talk about this. And this is my first principles rule, is if you're accepting public money, the taxpayers get to ask questions about where it's going. Full stop.
Dallas Brody is good. She's really good. But the problem is, the NDP are in power in British Columbia. And if the Conservatives win the next election, whatever that is, 3 years, maybe sooner because it's such a slim minority there. I think they've got a majority if the NDP teams up with the Greens. But it doesn't matter because John Rustad is a cuck. So how do we get actual, sensible, logical, reasonable people in government again? I mean, look at this exchange, and I played this earlier in the week. I'll play it again. Look at this exchange between Dallas Brody and the Premier, David Eby.
Yes, I have a point of order to raise, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking at section 40 sub 2 and 40 sub 3 of the standing orders. And the first one is disrespectful or offensive language forbidden, that's sub 2, and irrelevance in debate, that's sub 3.
In my answer, I was specifically referring to the staff member that was hired by the Leader of the Opposition who was fired recently for being a racist residential school denialist, properly fired, by the way. I congratulate him for taking that appropriate stand. A little late, but he did take it. I support it. But you wouldn't find me hiring people like that. If the member thought I was talking about her, perhaps that's her issue.
Sub 2 says, no member shall use offensive words against any member of this House. The Premier has repeatedly referred to me as being racist, denialist, and hateful. Am I now allowed to use words like stupid, incompetent, financially illiterate, anarchist? I mean, how far does this go?
She's good. She's really good, but BC is got a huge problem. Anywhere you go in that province, you'll see climate change signs all around. You'll see we welcome everybody all around, even at rest stops along highways. It's crazy. And look at this. Vancouver Park Board cancels Harry Potter attraction after trans activist outrage. Because of J.K. Rowling, right? A Harry Potter-themed holiday attraction in Stanley Park, approved by the Vancouver Park Board, has stirred controversy and prompted an apology from city officials due to backlash from the city's transgender and gender-diverse communities. The Vancouver Park Board apologized after approving the Harry Potter, a Forbidden Forest experience following strong backlash from members of the city's so-called transgender and gender-diverse communities. Commissioners voted unanimously on Tuesday to apologize and to strengthen consultations with the city's S2LGBTQ plus advisory committee. My God, for future events that carry equity or human rights complications. There's video of it, but it's painful. So I'm not going to play it. It's ridiculous. Now, the left-wing corporate media earlier this week was whining and screaming and crying about a premature baby apparently dying from measles in Alberta throughout the province. As cases rise to 2,000. Measles, oh my God. An infant in Alberta has died from the measles, they say, as cases creep close to 2,000 through the province, according to the government's dashboard. It's Alberta's first death since the most contagious virus on earth made a resurgence in Canada. Can you even believe this nonsense? A child born prematurely after the mother contracted measles during pregnancy died shortly after birth, the province said Thursday. They don't talk about any other possible conditions the mother may have had. They don't talk about the premature birth possibly causing issues. Of course, I'm sad for the family that their baby has died. But they're trying to make it all about the measles and how dangerous it is. In the meantime, Ted Kuntz of Vaccine Choice Canada was on earlier this week talking about the measles vaccine. Watch what he had to say here.
Introduced the measles back in 1963. They claimed that one shot would stop measles and that it would be eradicated by 1967. So they claimed that within 4 years they would eradicate measles. Clearly that was not the case. 2 and 3 shots are now required. Measles has never been eradicated. As of June the 27th of 2025, so this data is up to date, there are more than 117,000 reports of adverse reactions reactions, including death, as a result of the measles vaccine. Of those reports, 574 are deaths, 9,000 hospitalizations, and 2,000 disabilities. Now, that number is actually not the true number. There was a study that was done in 2010 in the United States that revealed that less than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported. So that number should likely be 100 times what's listed. And so that means that the number of deaths from the measles vaccine is in the neighborhood of 57,000 deaths.
I'm just going to leave it there. You guys can decide for yourselves what you think about all of that. Here's another ridiculous story out of Alberta. Appeal filed challenging the Law Society of Alberta's power to compel ideological training of lawyers. I did some research on this today. Turns out that law societies are completely and totally self-governing. In other words, the provinces can only step in case of major misconduct. And that's it. And the members of these law societies all across the country in every province are elected by the members of the bar in whichever province they happen to serve. So the JCCF released this today. An appeal has been filed in the case of Alberta lawyer Roger Song, challenging the Law Society of Alberta's power to impose mandatory cultural competence and other ideological conditions on lawyers in Alberta. The appeal follows the September 12, 2025 ruling of the Court of King's Bench of Alberta, which effectively upheld the Law Society's authority to compel lawyers to complete mandatory training and to amend its code of conduct to prohibit harassment and discrimination along ideological lines. And what does that mean? Mr. Song, a former law professor in Beijing who immigrated to Canada after living through Mao Zedong's violent cultural revolution and a lifetime of Maoist indoctrination, argued that the Law Society's actions amount to compelled ideology and political coercion that violate critical professional independence and his charter rights under Section 2A on freedom of conscience and belief and Section 2B on freedom of expression. Mr. Song's appeal challenges several Law Society actions, including Rule 67.4, which purports to empower the society to mandate ideological training, a professional development profile that redefines competence to include ideologically compliant belief, speech, and advocacy. Rule 67.2 and .3, which compel lawyers to submit annual continuing professional development plans to the regulator, which must be developed with reference to the professional development profile, and Part 6.3 of the Code of Professional Conduct, which redefines discrimination and harassment in vague ideological terms. Constitutional lawyer Glenn Blackett said the Law Society seems bent on transforming Alberta lawyers into a sort of woke commissariat who see Western legal systems like our Constitution as systems of colonial and anti-Black oppression. Unfortunately, the lower court largely refused to look at the evidence or consider the arguments. It's viewed the political nature of the Law Society's conduct as something that attracted immunity from judicial review. Mr. Song and I think that's plainly wrong. The Law Society has no place in politics, and it's the court's job to say so. The appeal will seek to overturn the lower court's decision and to consider the central question: can the regulator of lawyers adopt any political objective, much less one that's hostile to the Constitution? How many of these ridiculous things are we going to see in this country from boards, from NGOs, from corporations, from governments that completely and totally impinge on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? It's gotten to the point where we can use it to wipe our asses these days. Sorry for the mental picture. Here's a media release, came out a couple of days ago from Winnipeg Police. The Manitoba Integrated High-Risk Sex Offender Unit is a joint forces unit of the Winnipeg Police Service and the RCMP, and they provide information regarding somebody called William Lee Perswain, 41 years of age, a convicted sexual offender considered high risk to reoffend in a sexual manner against both youth and adult females. On October 8th, that's just Wednesday, Pursuane will be transferred to Winnipeg for his statutory release after serving a portion of his custodial sentence for a conviction of sexual interference. Although Pursuane has completed some sex offender programming while in custody, he remains a high risk to reoffend in a sexual manner against youth and adult females. This information is provided to enable members of the public to take suitable measures to protect themselves. It's Canadian justice system. Any form of vigilante activity or other unreasonable conduct directed at Mr. Pursuane will not be tolerated. There he is. Right there. They've released him into the public in Winnipeg. They don't say where. And Winnipeg is a city nearly 1 million people that measures 35 miles east to west and about 20 miles, 25 miles even north to south. It's kind of a big place. So should every woman in this city be terrified because this guy is out looking for new victims? Well, it shouldn't be, but it is. And it's nothing to do with the police. If the police had their way, this guy would be locked up. The key would be thrown away. But the Liberal government and their judges let him out. In Halifax, a gym has removed a race-based pricing system after criticism. They say it was not meant to be exclusive. You got a race-based pricing system, but it's not meant to be exclusive. It's inherently exclusive, you idiots. You there, white man, you're paying 50% more than this black guy over here just because of your skin color. Halifax Gym says it's removed race-based pricing after feedback and criticism about a discounted rate intended to foster diversity and inclusion. I don't know how much more stupid you can get. Our Studios, which has 5 locations in Nova Scotia, came under fire this week after posts on social media pointed out the discount. Our friend Jeff Evely is back in the news. He said that on X, that charging double for white people compared to black and indigenous people of color or BIPOC customers was in violation of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act. Evely is also a PPC candidate. Why do they even have to include that? Yes, Jeff was a PPC candidate. That has no relevance to this story whatsoever. A business cannot discriminate against customers based on race, according to Section 5 of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act. Evilly posted screenshots of the gym's website showing one studio drop and pass for $30 and another for $15, which was labeled as the BIPOC drop in rate. The discount is no longer available on the gym's website, and it's since been posted or has posted a statement on social media. In a fitness industry that's long been predominantly white, good God, and often inaccessible, we've taken pride in being leaders who actively promote diversity through our hiring practices, in-studio equity and inclusion training, and the creation of our IDEA. That would be Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Committee. Ongoing efforts to ensure all individuals feel seen and represented within our walls. They have to feel seen. I go to the gym. I don't want to be seen, man. I go for an hour. I'm in the corner. I'm trying to do everything I can, then get the hell out of there. Be seen. Give me a break. There are so many brainwashed idiots in this country. Are we ever going to be able to clean it up? My goodness. Jimmy Kimmel does not believe that Antifa exists. Look at this.
Understand. There's no Antifa. This is an entirely imaginary organization. There is not an Antifa. This is no different than if they announced they rounded up a dozen Decepticons. We've captured the Chupacabra, everyone. And then it was Trump's turn to ratchet up the rhetoric with fiery images conjured from no one has any idea where.
Jimmy Kimmel is an idiot. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody who denies the existence of this terror group, because that's what they are, at least that's what they've been listed as in the United States now, and Donald Trump is very close. I think maybe he's already done it as listing Antifa as an international terrorist organization also. That anybody who says that there is no such thing as Antifa, and that includes Canadian politicians and officials, because they have said there's no such thing as Antifa. That's ridiculous. You white people, you're the problem. I think they're probably Antifa as well. I mean, if you think about it, and we did a thing on the extension the other night, talks about how high, and, you know, Greg and I talked about it, Wycliffe and I talked about it on the show the other night, how high through the structure of this country that Antifa ideology exists through universities, maybe even the courts and police. It's bad. So Antifa, yes, it is an ideology, but there is a physical aspect of it. Andy No is a reporter, a West Coast-based independent reporter in the United States, and he knows all about Antifa. He's been killed by, or almost killed by them twice. And here he is talking about it.
So the wall of mounts was at the front. These were the human body shields, and that's where all the cameras would face them. Behind them would be the people in the black bloc who would throw the projectile weapons. And they brought things that were meant to look not very dangerous, like a water bottle. Well, the water bottles were frozen. What do you think happens when that's thrown at somebody's head with force? They had lasers, so it looked like, oh, cool, a laser light show. No, when you have 50 people directing these lasers at the eyes of an individual officer, you get injuries that can damage the eye permanently. And there were dozens of federal agents whose eyes were injured. And on the laser subject, right now, an Antifa blog in Portland has put out flyers and put out posts online calling for their comrades to try to aim all their lasers at the pilot that flies the DHS helicopter over the ice facility.
Are these like the Blackhawks over the...
Yes, they're trying to cause a crash, kill people. So they're using some of the tactics they learned before. They don't have as many people, but they have so much experience, and they're emboldened because they weren't held accountable.
Yeah, you know, on his Substack just a couple of days ago, he wrote a piece on the Portland police chief who apologized to Antifa. Wow. Police Chief Bob Day is the city's worst police leader yet. When you've got police officers, chiefs of police, who are apologizing to Antifa, you may as well just wave that white flag and say, we give up. You guys take over the city. That's it. That's it. Go ahead. Now, where do they get their funding from is the question. Surely they can't do it without money, right? I mean, bricks. You know how much bricks cost? They're throwing bricks all the time. They've got weapons of war, these people. That's expensive. So where does the money come from? Glenn Beck was breaking it down just today.
You have this, funding sources. Now, this is interesting. Again, who do you write to check to? This is split between nonprofits and foundations, also crowdfunding sources. Now, I already mentioned the Tides Foundation, one of the darkest of the dark left-wing radical money funnels on the planet. You know, who knows all the trails that lead back to Tides? But just for starters, let's look at these. Tides Foundation funds an organization called Alliance for Global Justice. Money from here. They refunnel money to groups like Refuse Fascism. They also give to the National Lawyers Guild, over $1 million from 2018 to 2019 alone. Are you going to write a check for $1 million to a leaderless group that has no organization at all and just say, yeah, you guys know what to do with it? Who knows what to do with it? This is how the radical left-wing money trail operates. It's designed to be opaque. It's designed to be confusing and disappear. But the connections are all there. So why haven't we done anything about it up until now? Okay, up next, who else but George Soros' Spooky Dudes Open Society Foundation. They also fund the Alliance for Global Justice. They also are with the Antifa support groups. The charitable funding sources are legion for just that one. Then you have Fidelity Investments. Where do you have your money invested? Fidelity Investments Charitable Gift Fund. They donate to the National Lawyers Guild. Also, Schwab Charitable Fund. Boy, if I had my money in Schwab, or Fidelity, I don't know if I would have it. They're giving to the people who are supporting these people. I mean, I could go on, and we haven't even gotten to the crowdfunding platforms. You have ActBlue and Patreon. You have Fundraiser, the Action Network. Then you have book sales. Book sales? Oh yeah, book sales like the college professor that produced the Antifa handbook. Look, I'm not accusing anyone here. I'm just saying this is pretty much off the top of my head. I'm just showing the connections that have a very strong odor attached to them. And I've followed these people long enough to know this is the way it works. This one chalkboard alone is enough for the Trump administration just to start. I mean, just start. And they are. And it should be enough alone just to debunk the ridiculous notion. Just the question, who are you writing checks to? $1 million check. Who's cashing it? What bank? Where is this happening? Schwab is giving to just street kids who, what? It's ridiculous to believe that. Ridiculous. Antifa now has been designated as a terrorist organization. It is about time. And it is time to turn over all of the stones.
He intends to do that. Andy Ngo has been on this for 5 years. His views are into the millions, and yet for some reason, people still continue to ignore this terrorist group. This is about a month and a half ago in Portland. Look what Antifa did. And I saw in the comments that somebody had suggested, yeah, they have lawyers. Antifa's got lawyers. Absolutely they do. Sometimes they're on the ground with them. They wear special orange helmets. They have medics with little red crosses on their uniforms so they can go and take care of any of their soldiers who have been injured by National Guardsmen. Yeah, they operate very much like military. Watch this. Oh, right. And they also deal in intimidation. Here they're bringing out a guillotine.
Give him a shirt. That's the most badass thing I've seen all night. I'm in for real.
And they are surrounding an ICE facility there in downtown Portland.
To allow for vehicular traffic.
And they have media there too, their own media. Look at the guy with the media shirt on.
Remain on the sidewalk or across the street. Everyone must leave this restricted area and may be subject to detention, arrest, or exposure to chemical munitions for failing to depart the restricted area.
Are you going to try to tell me that they are not an organized terror group? Really? Jimmy Kimmel? Like the Chupacabra? The Sasquatch? You're in on it, buddy. You're being funded by them somehow. So Donald Trump was asked today, you're going to make Antifa an international terrorist group? And here's what he was talking about.
Are you going to work with your administration as the Secretary of State's here? Are you going to work with your administration to designate it a foreign terror organization?
You mean a terror?
Antifa? A foreign terror organization.
Well, has that been done? Pretty close, right? Would you like to see it done?
Yes, Mr. President.
Do you think it would help?
They have foreign links
I'd be glad
all
to
across
do it.
Western
I think it's
Europe.
the kind of thing I'd like to do. If you'd like, does
Middle
everybody
East.
agree? If you agree, I agree. Let's get it done. Okay? Let's get it done. Marco, we'll take care of it.
Mr. President.
That's international, you mean?
Yes.
International.
Yes, Mr. President.
Sounds good to me.
Foreign terror organization.
Steve, are you okay with it?
Yes, it's true. There are extensive foreign ties, and I think that would be a very valid step to take.
Good, I think so too.
Yes.
Good, I think it's a good point. Thank you.
International terrorist organization. Antifa. And seeing as how Canada's got Antifa activity, it may be tougher to get across the border for casual people going for a weekend now because of them. So is Trump going to make Carney respond to this, considering our proximity to each other, our countries? I wonder if that was on the table during their discussions earlier this week. It's interesting. That's it for tonight, you guys. Thank you for being here. In the extension tonight, I've got video of a presentation by Dr. Anna Maria Malhotra talking about transhumanism. But it's going to be viewer's choice tonight. It's going to be All Access Nighthawk's choice tonight at shadowdavis.com. And if you are buying a subscription, and by the way, again, we're at last count 94. We need 200 by next Wednesday. 200 by next Wednesday, or we're taking the show off social media. I just cannot work for free any longer. So the show will be for exclusive subscribers at shadowdavis.com. If we can get to 200 subscribers, then we'll keep her going. We need to prove this is sustainable so that the show can continue. And we need money to do that. So go ahead and grab yourself a subscription, either monthly or yearly, at shadowdavis.com, just like it's spelled right at the bottom of the page. And if you do that, don't forget to become a member of the Telegram group, because that's where we do our talking afterwards during the extension. Shadow at Night Community on Telegram, and I will see you there. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving long weekend. I'll be back on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Central. Bye for now.